Hi, I'm Stephen Troincheck with HorrOrigins.com. HorrOrigins is a website about horror content where you can find reviews, articles, and interviews. HorrOrigins also runs a festival that takes feature films, short films, and scripts. You can find all of this at HorrOrigins.com or at HorrOrigins on Twitter. This interview is part of a series where we talk to a number of incredible screenwriters working in the horror genre. Today, I'm talking to Melody Cooper, who among her other achievements is a writer for the CW's 2-Second Horror Stories. Hi.
Hi.
Thank you for coming on the interview.
Thanks for having me.
So I wanted to start things off with kind of a fun question about, what horror is capable of and everything like that. When it comes down to what's your favorite subgenre in horror?
I love paranormal and supernatural, and that can cross, for me, I love it because it can cross the subgenres of sci-fi and ghosts and revenge. So that, and it also crosses all kinds of cultures and geographies. So I I tend to live in that world, but I'm open. When I have this chart from Two Sentence Horror Stories, when we were in the writer's room, someone printed out this chart of all the subgenres and all the genres of horror, which is, it's much bigger than one would think. And I realized I probably touched on every single one of them, except for probably torture porn. But aside from that, it's such a vast world. I kind of play across all of it, but supernatural probably is, paranormal is my fave.
You can definitely see that in the 2 episodes that you pointed me towards that you contributed to on 2-Second Horror Stories. Quota was really, really excellent. I enjoyed it quite a bit. So kind of a fun question is that I like to ask horror writers is if they ever get scared by their own writing.
Yeah, I do, because, and actually Two Sentence Horror Stories is definitely the most recent. I've been scared in the past where I've had to not write at night, but I personally have paralytic dreams, and the form of dreams that I have I have visual and auditory hallucinations with it. So it's a lot of fun. And that's where, for people who don't have it, it's where you're awake, but you cannot move. And you hear and see things. Sometimes it can be someone at the figure standing at the end of the bed. I've had all kinds of scary and really frightening things happen. So for the Two Sentence Horror Stories episode Ibeji, about these twin African sisters, one of them has sleep paralysis, has those kind of dreams. And so writing that was frightening. And then even more so, Ola Bagun was the director. Bola Ogun was the director, and she was able to capture it so well. And it was hard for me to watch the episode where she has the sleep paralysis, because sometimes when I see it, it brings it on. So it was scary. Yeah, that was scary.
I mean, in that episode, it is really a terrifying element. I can't imagine, honestly.
Yeah.
But, something that I noticed about both the episodes that you wrote or contributed to writing are something that I really enjoy about the horror genre, which is that horror is a really good genre wherever you can kind of play around with logic. It doesn't necessarily have to be completely consistent. So I kind of wanted to ask about, how do you approach logic within a horror script typically?
That's a great question. I think the way I think about it is I approach it from the context of the world and the story that I'm creating. And so it doesn't matter if it has logic in the real world at all, but if it needs to have logic within the context of the world building that I'm doing, and the characters that I'm building, and what their world is. And nothing bothers me more than when someone sets up a world and then doesn't follow the logic that they've created in that world. You gotta stick with it. So that's how I handle it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I do a bit of horror writing myself, and I find that to be a big truth, that internal logic is really important.
Yeah.
So what is one thing you think the horror genre does better than any other genre?
Well, besides the obvious of scaring the hell out of us, I think it subverts expectations better than almost any genre, or it has the ability to. And then for me, especially, also, I call it Trojan horsing in different issues and ideas that you want to tackle and deal with, where you do it through the genre. And I think there are a few genres that allow you to play around so much to get to that and do it in such an effective way. And I think that horror also isn't just about scaring us, it's about being compelling and drawing us into characters and caring and like running with them and you know, coming up with ways to survive with characters. So I think it's one of the few genres that can be so totally engaging.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. On the flip side, and this is kind of, this feels somewhat, I mean, it feels a little bit odd to ask horror writers this, but is there anything you think it can't do?
I think very little, because of the nature of it being so far ranging and that, like, you know, all the subgenres and all the different ways that, because it basically deals with life, it can and should. But I think it cannot solve life's problems. It cannot solve all of the world's problems. It can point to them, deal with them, you know, chew them up and spit them out, but it's not going to do that for you. Even, you know, when you look at something like Get Out, it's addressing issues of racism. But it's not solving it. It's not going to give you the answer, but it allows you to mull over, like, well, what would I do in this situation? Or what kind of issues did this now make me uncomfortable with or think about that I can now compare to real life? So it's not going to solve everything. But aside from that, I think there's very little it can do.
Yeah, it's always interesting whenever audiences, you know, they take in that piece of art and then they like kind of extrapolate and say, oh, this is addressing it and therefore something is fixed. And it's like, okay, that's not the way art works. So there are a lot of great horror heroines. I wanted to ask, what was your favorite? Who do you think is the best horror heroine of all time?
Well, the obvious answer, you know, is Ripley. A lot of us say that, and you know, when I first saw Ripley, especially in both films, but especially in Aliens, you know, that was like, that was an ultimate moment, right? But I was thinking about, there's some other more modern versions, like the latest Halloween, the fact that you had a trio of women from 3 generations. I love that, because that just speaks to me to where we are kind of now, and that they were working together to try to survive together, and to beat it was kind of fighting the past, present, and creating a future. So I thought that was great. And one of my favorites is Jennifer in Revenge. And just love the way she works her way through, and you think there's no way she could possibly survive. And then she actually, you know, does. And then even more recently, I don't know if you've seen The Kingdom, the Korean 17th century horror series.
I have not gotten to see that.
Oh, okay. So there's a woman doctor in it that is in it throughout, and how I like the fact that she's a medically, basically she uses science, and she also uses her wits, and she's also brave, and she's a great character, a heroine for that reason.
I'll have to check that one out.
Yeah.
There's a setup and payoff in Revenge that I absolutely love, which is the blood thing when they're running around at the end. Yeah. It's calling attention to just how much blood is in this scene.
Yeah.
So fantastic. So, you know, I think there are a lot of great horror heroines, but you know, horror is not always the best genre in capturing women as characters or so. What do you think is the most common cliche that you've found for women in horror films?
It's kind of a double one: victims and helplessness, and that kind of dovetails together. And it's not that women can't be victims, or I like to think better that women are survivors, and in that in that survival, that they're not helpless, that they're able to be engaged in their own survival. So those are the two I'd say.
So on the flip side of those cliches, and I noticed this in the 2 episodes that you contributed to, how do you go about actively subverting some of those tropes within the horror genre?
Well, first I put myself in the shoes of the characters, right? Like, what would I do? What would I want to do? So it's real. It's not just me layering on something. And what I decide is I'm going to let the women have agency, and I'm going to, and often, not always, depends on the project, I'm saying, let the women have agency, let them save the day. And then I let the context of the story drive exactly how that's going to happen. So it's organic to what I'm telling. But I make it, I often will make a choice, and also to make a choice for the woman to be the villain, and to be a villain who, without excuses, you know, it's okay for us to also be villain, but in whether villain or heroine, to have agency and to either ruin or save the day. And then I just kind of play with that.
Yeah, absolutely. That really sticks out in Quota. Just the way that the 2 women kind of band together to try and stop what's going on. So who do you believe is the best female horror director working today?
I'm wearing a shirt that has several of them on it.
Yes. Nia DaCosta, I think I saw there.
Yeah, well, it would be hard for me to answer that, because Karen Kusama is one of my favorite directors.
Yes.
When I saw the invitation, I was like, yes, please, yes. Just the way the character development and the cinematography and the tension building. I loved what she did with that film in particular. Last night I saw the film The Power that Karina Faith directed, set in England during the 70s, when they have prescribed power outages and what happens to this young nurse in a very big, strange hospital. And that was quite good. And Nia DaCosta, I can't wait to see what she's going to do with Candyman. I'm really looking forward to that. And also I'm co-founder of this group called Nyx NYX, Queen of the Night, Nyx Horror Collective, and we are going to be running a 60-second film festival. So 13 minutes of horror, but 13 short 60-second films, a kind of a 60-second challenge. And so we're hoping to find the next wave of really strong and amazing women horror directors through that.
Oh, that's wonderful. I mean, it's great that you're building a community there. I met Kusama at an opening of one of her films, and she was wonderful. She was just so gracious about anybody who talked to her about the films, and I love Jennifer's Body, which is of course, one of her other horror films or so, and yeah, she has really fantastic.
She has I can't remember. It's either Dracula or Frankenstein. She has a new horror film that she's in production for.
I think it's Dracula.
It is Dracula. And, cannot wait.
Yes,
so I'm excited about all of that.
That's going to be wonderful. So the last question that I typically ask people on these interviews is, if you could recommend a single horror film to the audience, what would it be? Just anything.
Any film?
Yeah. What gets your stamp of approval?
Oh, hands down, His House on Netflix.
Oh my God, it was incredible. It was so incredible.
That's my jam. That's my kind of, that's what I like to write. That's what I like to see. I've seen it twice, and if you've only seen it once, I recommend seeing it twice or 3 times, but I've seen it twice and it resonates just as much. And there are things that you catch the second time. It's so moving and still frightening the second time around. I love that film. I highly, highly recommend it.
Absolutely. The music I found incredible, especially at the ending there, where they're all standing together. And that's a midpoint. That movie has quite a midpoint there.
Oh yeah, it's like I said, Ooh, I wrote a play with a haunting in it. I think it was my second play, and it's set in Rwanda. So a lot of what, you know, his house is about, without spoiling it, resonated for me. So and the idea of being able to incorporate, when you talked about what can horror do, being able to incorporate what happens in our real lives with, you know, with horror, I think is a really special aspect of horror.
I completely agree. So before we wrap up, I typically ask if you could give a place where people can find you, like a Twitter account or so. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm on Twitter, I'm Melody M. Cooper. And on Instagram, I'm Melody Cooper Film. And those are the places where you can catch me.
All righty, excellent. So this has been HorrOrigins for HorrOrigins.com, an interview, and you can find that, of course, at HorrOrigins.com or on our YouTube channel. Just a reminder, HorrOrigins runs a film festival with features, shorts, and interview and screenplays, and we conduct interviews and post articles. I'm Stephen Tronichek. This has been Melody Cooper. Thank you so much again, and see you later.